Hello, and thank you for listening to Cool Nerds Unite. I'm your host, Roderick. Recently, I had the honor and privilege of interviewing Arvell Jones. Arvell Jones is a native Detroiter. Arvell Jones is an American comic book artist for Marvel Comics and for DC Comics. Please enjoy the interview that I had with Arvell Jones. This is part 1 of part 2 of my interview with Arvell Jones. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I give you a legend, extraordinary artist, not just any artist, by the way, a phenomenal comic book artist. Mr. Arvell Jones is here with us on Cool Nerds Unite. How you doing, Arvell?
I'm doing okay. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, sir. I know you're real busy, and I know you're probably working on some phenomenal artwork.
I'm always doing something.
Oh, that's great. So, Arvell, what city did you grow up in? What city are you from?
I actually was born in Detroit, Michigan, kind of right down the street from the Institute of Arts.
Okay.
So my father was a factory worker at first, electrician at Ford Motor Company.
Okay.
And then later he became an entrepreneur, a TV repairman, fixing televisions and things like that. And my mother was a registered nurse. She used to work at Detroit Receiving.
Well, that's not too far from here.
Yeah,
actually.
exactly. And I had two brothers. One brother actually from a previous marriage with my father. He grew up in Houston, Texas, and my other brother, my younger brother, Desmond, grew up alongside me in Detroit.
Mm-hmm. Wow, right here in Motown.
Yeah. Yep. And I went to Cass Technical High School. Bumped around at Wayne State and did that for a while until I transitioned for a short time to New York.
All right.
And I had to stay in school. I couldn't stay up there, so I would catch whatever classes I could. At School of Visual Arts, Art Students League, Pratt, and Parsons. Whatever I could get my hands on. Either adult classes or continuing ed kind of studies, or figure drawing classes, or whatever. I sat in on Will Eisner. And,
really?
Yeah. Snuck in on John Buscema, used to do sketches and drawing classes at Marvel for a minute.
Wow, that's extraordinary.
Yeah. All before they formed their own schools and things like that. So,
yeah, I used to see the advertisement in the comic books a whole lot, and I would think to myself, if only I had the money.
Yeah. Most of my comic book training came out of what I learned here in Detroit whenever I could. I volunteered for the Detroit Triple Fanfare, which was one of the first big comic conventions in the nation.
Wow.
And, we're talking, 60, 68, 67. I can't even remember how far back. But I was barely in high school. Might have even been in middle school, when I did that. I started a newsletter for fans back in the day called Fan Informer.
Wow.
And through that vehicle, I met Tom Orzechowski and Jim Starlin and Alan Milgram and, Mike Vosberg and Mike Nasser and Greg Theakston and, it's like about 15 different people, in and around the city, for which most of them became pros. Me and Tony Isabella met that way.
Very good.
Yeah. And what we would do is get together on Saturdays and look at each other's work and critique each other's work. You know, sometimes I go over to Rich's house, sometimes over to Tom Orzechowski, sometimes over to Greg Theakston's or Greg Theakston, and everybody would come to my house. You know, we would meet, look at each other's work on each other's samples. We even we would do stuff for the newsletter. And in fact, it became less of a newsletter and more of an art newsletter. You know, it was almost all art with a couple of little articles in it and everything, because most of my friends were artists. So, you know.
That's a great way to advertise, too.
Yeah, you know, it did. And we got the attention of Marvel to a degree, you know. We had Nikolai Cuddy, who was a bullpen person or assistant editor or whatever. I'm not exactly sure what his term was. He would send us, you know, stats and artwork to, you know, and then Roy Thomas would leak us news.
That comes in handy.
Yeah. You know, it would be a long distance call. And Roy was a very fast talker. And I was a very slow note taker. So he'd get annoyed if I had to ask him the same question a couple of times. So I had to try to get as much down as possible. Wow. Sometimes I get some things wrong. He'd get annoyed at that. But, you know, we would do that. My dad was very much in support of me doing this whole thing. So when I wanted to go to New York, to the New York Comic Con, one of the first, you know, conventions there in New York, they called it Phil Souling's New York Comic Con. My dad.
When was that, actually?
Oh, man, goodness. I can't even tell you. I was 13 years old, maybe.
Oh, my God. You were 13 years old?
Yeah. I'm 65 now. Just give you an idea how I can't remember.
Wow. I wouldn't have never guessed you were 65.
Yeah. But we would go up there, and he would kind of drop me off at the hotel and say, well, when's this convention over? I'd say, Dad, I'm not sure. And he said, well, I'll check back with you around 7. Well, me and your mother going to dinner, or we're going to go hang out and see New York, and we'll come back and see you later. So they would leave me there, and I would, you know, mingle with everybody and, you know, harass everybody. They say, oh, no, here's that nerd coming. But the word wasn't nerd back then. It was like fanatic. And I met a lot of people back then. Paul Levitz and Frank Frazetta, Dan Atkins, Russ Heath, Jack Kirby, Stan Lee. Yep.
Stan Lee.
Yep.
Wow.
Meet them all.
That is phenomenal.
And so I was like going to a lot of conventions and then working on the Detroit Triple Fanfare and then going to some other shows as they developed. When I got old enough to drive, it was no limit. You know, I take the dad's car when I could, and then when he finally got me a car, you know, I was everywhere. You know?
Wow. So Arvell, let me ask you something. Mm-hmm. This is really heavy on my mind. How is it interacting with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby on a regular basis?
Well, I didn't interact with Jack Kirby on a regular basis. I talked to him like maybe 4 times at a convention. He called me up when I first started my newsletter.
Wow.
And he consented to an interview.
Okay.
And we did a really quick little interview. It's actually a questionnaire that I sent him through the mail, you know, and then he kind of filled it out and got it back to us. At that time, that's kind of how you did it. But then one day, you know, I sent him some of my artwork to take a look at, and I went through Marvel, and Marvel forwarded to him, and I hadn't forgotten about it, but I didn't expect him to get a reply or anything. And then one day, my father picks up the phone. Back then, everybody had landlines. fact, there wasn't a term landline; there was telephone.
I
picked up
remember
the
that.
telephone and handed me the phone and said, was handing me the phone and says, you got some guy named Jack on the phone. And I said, Jack, I don't know.
Some guy named Jack.
Yeah. And he didn't know, and I said, Jack Kirby? He said, find out for yourself. And kind of threw the phone towards me. I picked the phone up.
Lost my mind.
I said hello, and I heard this kind of Brooklyn-like accent, this older man. He said, hi, Arvell, this is Jack Kirby. And, my thought was, be cool now. This is audio, so that nobody can see that.
No. Ladies and gentlemen, if you only could see him do that, that's just hilarious.
And I gathered my composure, and I said, hi, Jack. And he says, I got your artwork. You're very good. He says, in the mail, I sent you a sketch. And, for your newsletter, I enjoyed your newsletter very much. And it was pleased to see it. And, we had probably done some coverage of Jack in it. And then he said, if you ever need anything, let me know. I think if you keep at it, you can be a comic book artist. That's all I ever need to hear. Jack King Kirby told me if I kept at it, I could be a comic book artist.
Jack Kirby.
Yep. And it was on after that, I was either going to be a baseball player or a comic book artist. After Jack said that, I never made it to the Tigers.
Oh, my God.
I was a fairly
That
decent
is
pitcher in
phenomenal.
the Little League.
So who inspired you to become a comic book artist?
Jack Kirby.
Jack Kirby? Okay.
Yeah. Like I said, I used to look at his art all the time. Mm-hmm. To roll it back a little bit, I discovered I was very much into Batman and Superman and those characters. And one day I went over to my cousin's house. His name is Winston Williams Jr. And I was talking about Batman and all that stuff. And he says, man, have you ever seen the X-Men or the Avengers? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I said, I had a Spider-Man comic, Amazing Fantasy 15, back in the day, that I used to roll up and keep in my pocket. My father gave me a few comic books to learn to draw with.
Yeah.
They were early on. But no, I didn't really know those characters, And so he, went in his room and came out with a little box full of comics. And we looked at them all day long and talked about them. And I read about the Fantastic Four and the Avengers and Thor and Captain America. And
the classics.
All of those guys. And then every other week, then I wanted to go to his house and read some more. And then he had a buddy down the street who had a big box of comics that was selling 5 for $1. And I was buying everything in the box whenever I got some money and read through them and then I started copying a little bit, kind of not tracing, but trying to copy the work and try to understand the storytelling, start studying it. Because it was a motivation of mine to not necessarily do comics at the time, but to be a storyteller.
Okay.
And a writer, director. Some of these terms I didn't exactly know what they were. So, I did whatever was necessary to kind of try to figure out how to get the story thing done. And I tried to talk my dad into an 8mm film camera, and he gave me a stack of paper and some pencils,
and there it is.
And some comic books, and told me, when you're good enough that, you can make other people want to buy your stories, I'll buy you that film camera. Never did, but But I also have to give credit to the people I met along the way while I was, still in high school and junior high and going to these conventions. The first critique I got, professional critique, was from Al Williamson. And he was at Detroit Triple Fan Fair, and I brought some of my work over and looked at it, and he looked at it and he says, first of all, you got to start using, professional paper. And he showed me what the professional paper was. You get some Bristol board, instead of, ballpoint pens, you need India ink, and that's what this is, and quill pens, and, and all of that. And he kind of explained that to me, but he didn't really give me he just kind of told me what I needed to start with. So, I got some of that stuff, and I'm fumbling around with it. And then another year goes by, and then there's Jim Steranko, and Jim just looked at my work and said, He said, you got a lot of work to do, but keep at it, kid. And shook my hand vigorously and let me go. That's all I needed, though.
Yeah, that was inspiration to you.
Yeah, Jim Steranko and, the year before, Al Williamson both gave me a thumbs up to keep trying. And I don't know if I was getting any better, but, they were still, encouraging me. And then I met Rich Buckler, and he was a little older than me, about 3 years. And he had a little, back then we didn't know what to call it, but I would call it swagger now. And he could draw like Jack Kirby, and he could draw like Wally Wood, and he could draw like, several, little Gil Kane, a little, he had several styles he could work with, a little Ditko in his work, and he was trying to find himself. And then, I was looking at some of the books and stuff that he looked at, and I went out and bought a bunch of books on anatomy and perspective and all that, and I was working on my own. And he would look at my work, and then we started working a little bit together. He would take my art and ink over it, his Wally Wood style. And I go, oh man, this is cool, and I take some of his work and try to ink over it. And he said, you need to work on the inking a little bit more before you really start. But he didn't mind if I messed his work up, because he looked at it like, screw it. Yeah. We're just learning, Yeah. And so he had a VW Beetle. And then he would come over, and he would be like a whirlwind, come in. Here, look at this, look at that, look at this, look at this fanzine I got, look at that. And I was like, okay. He was sharing everything with me. And I said, cool. And then one day he came over, and it was him and this other guy that became an actor. And I can't think of his name right now, but he was, I do remember his name. But for some reason he was in Detroit, and he hadn't been an actor yet. I didn't know who he was. He barely spoke to him.
Well-known actor.
His name is Peter Gallagher. He was in While You Were Sleeping. He was the sleep guy in While You Were Sleeping. He's been in a lot of different films, fairly, if you saw his face, look him up on IMDb.
Okay.
But him and Rich he said, I'm going to New York. I said, why? He said, screw it. I'm just going to go up there and meet everybody and talk to everybody. I'm going to beat them down till they give me a job. And I said, okay. And Peter was with him. And Pete didn't hardly say anything. Something happened on the road. I don't know what it was, but I talked to Rich years later. I said, whatever happened to that guy you were with? He said, what guy? He said, guy when you first moved. He said, what, Peter Gallagher? He said, he became a famous actor. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, we had a little disagreement on the road and never talked again.
Oh, okay. One of those scenarios.
Yeah. But, me and Rich would communicate and everything. And every once in a while, he'd come home to visit his mom. He invited me up. He says, man, come on, you need to come up here, man. You need to come up here. And I said, I'm not ready. Plus, I'm still in school. He said, no, well, just come up, and I'm working on this job. I need an assistant. And I said, okay, I'll come up for the summer. So our arrangement was I would come up and work for him for the summer. Okay. He would feed me. He would take me to the movies every once in a while, and I would learn the business.
Sounds good to me.
Yep. My mother called it slavery, but because there was no mention of cash. But she liked Rich, So I went up there, and for the summer I was assisting him for 2 summers in a row. And after the second summer up there, I worked on Jungle Action featuring the Black Panther.
All right.
Creating Killmonger.
Oh, wow.
Him and Don McGregor. And I'd see them, they really were close collaboration, especially Don. Don had all these ideas. He would sketch stuff up. He would get up on top of a table. He would pose. He would do anything he could to help Rich visualize what he was saying. And, Rich would say things like, well, you did give me the plot. And he says, yeah, but Rich, the plot doesn't really, Don has a little bit of an accent, but he would go through and explain everything. And I'd watch these guys work, and it looked like fun to me, And Rich would give me things like, okay, draw all of these trees, put all the leaves on the trees. or you can do the background figures, really little background figures.
Okay. So Arvell, what are your thoughts about the Black Panther movie?
Oh, well, I was super geeked to hear it was being made, and I kept hearing it was going to be made, and I was all excited. I couldn't wait. And then one day, a buddy of mine who became an art director. We graduated high school together. Wow. His name is Art Sims. And Art was responsible for doing every Spike Lee movie poster that ever existed. And, from Do the Right Thing, you name him.
Mo Better Blues.
All of those are his.
School Days.
Yeah, those are all his. And he also did George Lucas's Red Tails movie poster.
That was a good movie too.
Things. Yeah. And, we graduated together. We both went up to New York. He went to the music business as a designer doing album covers.
Okay.
He did Peabo Bryson's and Angie Bofield's album covers.
Oh,
all kinds
Angela
of
Bofield?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And
Angela Bofield?
Yeah, he was doing that, and I was working at Marvel, and we just kind of sort of kept in touch.
Okay.
So he calls me up one day. He says, "You know anything about the Black Panther?" I said, "Man, they're doing a Black Panther movie, man. You're going to get the poster?" He said, "I'm trying to get the poster." He said, "I got to do some artwork, some sketches, some concept stuff." And I said, "What do you need, man? I'll help you. What do you need?" He said, "That's why I was calling you, hoping that you would help me." I said, "Man, yeah, I even was an assistant on the Black Panther one, so I know how he moves and all that stuff." He says, "Okay, well, I need some sketches." So I said, "Okay." So I did some sketches for him. And the next thing you know, he says, "Oh man, I'm doing the posters for Black Panther." I said, wow. "Really? What?" He said, "Yeah, we're doing key art." I said, "Whatever that is, that sounds good." "What do you need from me?" He says, "Well, you can tighten some of those sketches up and everything. Our job is to pose Chadwick Boseman." And I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "You're just doing some poses, and then Chadwick Boseman's going to do those poses."
Wakanda forever.
I said, "When are they shooting the movie?" He said, "Shooting the movie now." So I said, "Oh, okay." So, so I helped him out by doing that.
Okay.
And then he came back a little later and said, "Okay, we got some of these movie posters. What do you think?" And I said, "You're asking me?" He said, "Yeah, because Chad couldn't get all the poses that you were doing, so he kind of approximated."
Okay.
And so, you gotta retouch some stuff. I said, "Oh, no problem," and, so we did that. But anyway, not to get into a whole big thing. I love the Black Panther movie.
Hey, you know what? You can continue on. I'm fine.
But, I learned a little bit about the movie before it came out, saw some stuff, and everything, with working with art. And so I was very, very excited to see the movie come out. And then when the first teaser trailer came out, I went, "What?"
Yeah, me too.
And then the second teaser trailer, there was in the teaser, not just the trailer, but the poster that was out in the theaters. I went, "What?" They kind of took some. This is great. Art even decided to pay me a little something.
Well deserved, I might add.
Yeah. So, it was cool. That was an exciting time. And, the movies in general, I think have been excellent. They were stuff my dreams were made of. If it could be done the way I dreamed comic books, because I always didn't really look at myself as so much of a comic book artist as much as a storyteller, visual storyteller. And, later I got into television, and, I love to do other movie stuff, but that was, maybe my second movie thing. When we had the big movie industry thing here, I went to work for a movie studio for a little while.
Oh, that's great.
I've done a lot of stuff. I had an interactive company, and we did a film that was for Microsoft for interactive, transactional interactive story. And transactional means that, people could buy stuff while being a part of the story. And it was an experiment that Microsoft had, and they did it as a pilot. And so, the whole movie, I was just trying to get to where Marvel Studios is now as best I could, back in, the 90s and early 2000s.
So what characters have you created for the comic books?
Well, I created maybe a few characters, a lot of villains, or your everyday people that get killed, victims. I created maybe a couple of name characters that some of them got published, some of them didn't get published. But I did work on for Milestone. I did this character called Technique, which got to flesh her out, sort of a concept that Dwayne McDuffie who's also from Detroit, and Dennis Cowan, who used to be my assistant.
Dwayne McDuffie, he did some work on the Justice League as well, Justice League animated series.
Yes, he was a story editor and then a producer at one point, but he was from Detroit too. In fact, I knew him then, but neither I or him knew we knew each other.
Wow.
We had been in the same room several times because my aunt used to babysit him.
Used to babysit Dwayne McDuffie?
Yeah.
Wow.
And, I would come by to visit the aunt, and, he would be just a kid. I was a little older. I was maybe a teenager, and he was, in elementary school. So I didn't slap him around or anything, so we had to be friends. Later. And I didn't find out that we actually knew each other until he passed away and his bio came out in the Detroit Free Press or the news or something. And my aunt called me up and said, "Oh, little Dwayne died. Oh, boo." And I said, "Oh, wow."
Yeah,
so you're talking about it like you know who he was. And she said, "I used to babysit him. You used to come by. I introduced y'all. I fed y'all together one time or two." I said, "Well, he was one of them little, blockhead kids?" Sitting there and said, "Yes." What? So, but we got along great. But, and then I went to Marvel, and when I was at Marvel, and I got my first title, me and Tony Isabella, Tony walks up to me and goes, "Oh man, this has been great. We're working together and all that stuff." He says, "I want to come up with a character that Iron Fist can talk to because he needs a sidekick or somebody he can talk to." I said, "Oh, I got the perfect character."
If I may interject, the Iron Fist Netflix series needs some help too. I'm sorry, Arvell, continue. I had to interject.
Yeah, well, we can talk about that.
Okay.
But I'm going to be in front of those Netflix guys in Marvel next week, so.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I got to be diplomatic.
Yes, sir, I understand that. I concur. This is the end of part 1 of the interview with Arvell Jones. Part 2 of the interview with Arvell Jones is coming soon.